Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Lateral Show. Fasten your seatbelts, because here we go. Video!
Let's go.
It's the Lateral Show. We're on video. You can see us again. Oh my gosh, yes. Oh, for the listeners of the normal podcast, this is not going to make any difference to you. But if you're watching this on the Fantasy Six Pack YouTube channel, what's up? This is what we look like. Hi. Hello. My name is Herms. You can follow me on Twitter at Herms NFL. And I'm with this guy. Say hello, this guy.
Hello, this guy.
Oh, we're bringing the classic bit
You
back.
got to bring the energy right from the start. Oh, let's go. This feels good.
Yes, joining me as always, my co-host McLateral. Good times of plenty. We're getting really close to the season, man. It's a good time.
Yeah, I'm pretty stoked for it. Especially, we'll get into it later.
Oh. Man, honestly, like a ton of stuff to go over. But just first and foremost, thank you for checking this out. If you would like to, it'd be super cool if you hit the like button on this video. And if you could hit the subscribe, that would also be super cool, because it's not just this show. Okay, we got all sorts of fun stuff at Fantasy Six Pack. Just join the subscriber base or whatever it is, the Six Packers. I don't know. Is there a nickname for all of you? Whatever. We'll figure that out in the long run. But
alcoholics? No, that's not it.
A little too on the nose. But either way, like, subscribe, do the thing. Thank you so much for being here. The first thing that we are going to do is introduce ourselves a little bit with a segment that we like to call On My Soapbox. It's not always about introducing ourselves. Sometimes we just take this opportunity to talk about certain things that are kind of on our minds, but then we'll get into the main topic of the show, which is situations we're unsure of. Last week we had Joe Bond, the founder, kind of big wig dude here at Fantasy Six Pack, talking about planting our flag in players, just like we're sure these guys are going to be good. This week we're going to go over some things we're not so sure of, and we'll also sprinkle in some NFL news. But like I said, on my soapbox, you all might not know who we are, so I guess do you want who wants to introduce ourselves first? Does it matter?
I guess I'll go first, just if for nothing else, because otherwise I'm sort of just sitting here awkwardly not talking for a while. So I feel like it's better audio, if not better TV, video, whatever this thing is.
Oh yeah.
To do a little back and forth. So
absolutely.
As always, I say as always, but to some of you, I might be quite new. It's your boy McLateral, aka McLateralFF on the Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at McLateralFF, where I will answer all your fantasy football questions, put out my latest content that's going to be coming to Fantasy Six Pack. Should be coming out with one article a week during the season, so stay tuned for that. And then aside from the fantasy stuff, you can actually find me on Twitter at MacMcMillanATL, which is my personal handle now, because my job is a news writer for Tom's Guide, which is a text website. So a lot of tech news, whether it be streaming TV, video games, Apple rumors, et cetera, et cetera. So, wide range of things, little something for everyone. I write there regularly. That is my day job. So feel free to go check that out. And yeah, I think that's about it. More stuff will come up as, we get to know each other better, but I think that's the skinny.
Yeah, and if anybody's just wondering, it's just like, hey, well, what did you guys do before this? Just because it adds to your history as well as mine. The Lateral used to be a functioning website, www.thelateralff.com. We published articles every day of the week for them. Yeah, we ran that website for 2 years, but it just became too cumbersome.
Into the ground.
Absolutely. You'll still be able to find at least my rankings on it's a hub for my rankings now. That's all the domain name does.
Mine may eventually make it there. I have yet to do my adjustment post cut day. But we'll see if I get to it. If not, worst case, I do keep rankings fairly up to date, and I will mention them on the show when necessary.
Yeah. So, He's been writing for a long time on our website, also former Ball Blast writer. So if you're interested in some credentials, that's a thing there, which kind of, but either way, it ties it into me with some of my stuff. Like I said, we started the website and the podcast or whatever a couple of years ago. Now it's just this. I'm Herms. It's not my government name, but that's what I go by. I am a Steelers fan because why not? I don't know. That's where my parents are from. It's where my family's from. I didn't have much of a choice. I write for Fantasy Six Pack. I also write over at Football Absurdity with the homie Jeff Crisco, who I'm sure will come back on this show at some point. So the video audience, you will meet him. I've also been a contributor to Fantasy Pros. So I'm part of the expert consensus ranking as well. That is something that I am doing for the first time this year. I don't know, man. Anything else? I mean, we played in bands together in the past.
Yeah. You can see the guitars behind me.
Yeah. And then that song, our theme song, that was his band.
That was actually my band, yeah.
Yeah, so we get a little bit of that, and then
with that bass back there.
Yeah, so and then I think the thing I feel like people really need to know, if you haven't met us before, I mean, like we've known each other for damn near 20 years at this point.
It's been a while.
Very, very long time. But the origin of this is we are rivals in our home league. That is
true. Our home league that is drafting this weekend. Our home league that I would have won last year had it not been for one Antonio Brown retiring mid-game. Had I played anyone from my bench, I would have won. But I had Antonio Brown against the Jets, and I was like, you know what? This seems like a smart bet.
It happens, but either way, like a lot of the passion and kind of what seems like animosity and somewhat at times, the tempers flare because we're rivals. This is what we do. We're very, very good friends, very close for a long time. So we figured why not start a podcast, and now it's in video form and it's on Fantasy Six Pack. There is the information you need to know. Hey
man, again, season's eatings. 'Tis the season of the Six Pack. It officially begins here.
Yeets and greets. 100%. Let's get ourselves into the news section. Now, unfortunately, there are like a billion different things that happen because of roster cuts. We can't go over all of them. So we kind of pre-agreed upon a small handful of things that are pretty important. We will start with the Baltimore Ravens backfield because rookie Tyler Beatty did not make the roster. That flew out the window. Then Gus Edwards, PUP, we already kind of talked about that. I mention it again just because it kind of builds up to the point of we're still not sure about J.K. Dobbins. Who knows if he's going to be ready.
Didn't look good today.
But they bring in Kenyon Drake. So, I mean, honestly, my question to you is how much do you care? Because, there might be an opportunity there, but again, how big of an opportunity, who knows?
People, I've been telling you for weeks, nay, months, nay, years even. You don't need to draft Mike Davis. And this is exactly why, because they were never going to trust him with this. Now, apparently they seem reluctant to trust rookies with it as well. Now, granted, the one rookie they do seem to like, well, he's no longer a rookie, but J.K. Dobbins was someone that they drafted with fairly high draft capital. He's lived up to that barring injury, and so they will trust him once he's healthy. But you look at Tyson Williams, getting that name correct from last year. He struggled. They got rid of him. They went with some veteran names. This year, Tyler Beatty didn't quite click. They got rid of him. They're going with some veteran names again. This is a team that believes that it can compete every year. And so they are going to bring in the veteran pieces that make sure that mistakes don't happen. So I think Kenyon Drake will be a meaningful part of this offense until J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards are ready to go. And so I think he's valuable enough to draft towards the end of your traditional 12-team Yahoo or ESPN league. Wouldn't spend like a single-digit round pick on him, but some of the later rounds, certainly better than Mike Davis. I think he's going to be the lead back if Dobbins and Edwards are out. And even if Dobbins is ready for week one, he might get some valuable touches. I think he's definitely a better running back than Mike Davis at this point. And he's kind of the next man up. So we'll see if they bring in anyone else. But for now, I think Drake is worth keeping an eye on. I would not expect him to, have a repeat of the Cardinals years, because once J.K. Dobbins is healthy, that will be his backfield. And then when Gus Edwards gets healthy, he will take that RB2 role for sure.
Yeah, and like even with the opportunity that he finds himself in with the Ravens, I think I only moved him up to my RB60 in my post roster cut day rankings. Again, like you said, later consideration, it might bring you some early season value as like a bridge player if you're drafting somebody like one of the younger players, for example, waiting for them to break. Who knows? There's a myriad of reasons why it could be an interesting thing, but nothing to super overreact to. I echo all of your sentiments. As far as other running back situations go, there is I'm going to toss this one in as a freebie just because it's about your 49ers. How about Trey Sermon not making the team?
He wasn't that good. It turns out he was not that good. I'm not surprised. That's why, I was happy to get the hand of the king, Tyrion Davis Price, in our rookie draft for the Dynasty League that we're in. Like, Trey Sermon is not held up at all. He has not been efficient at all. He's not an effective pass catcher out of the backfield. He's not an effective blocker. Like, there was no reason to keep him around, so they didn't. Unfortunately, they didn't keep your boy, JaMycal Hasty, either, who had added a little bit more value over the past couple of years. So that was a little disappointing, a little bittersweet to see him go. But I think they got a pretty lean unit this year. And I mean lean metaphorically, because all those dudes is big. Like Elijah Mitchell, TDP, Jeff Wilson, these are not the smallest running backs on the face of the planet.
And also, hey, for you Dynasty people out there, like, I'm sure, like, in a deep enough league, this person has already been picked up in roster, but Jordan Mason, the rookie out of Georgia Tech, maybe, because it's a Shanahan thing, something to keep an eye on, something to throw out there. But speaking of big boys, one that actually does matter a little bit more. So initially, like, a couple days ago, I was like melting down because I was like, oh no, my sleeper pick of Sony Michel has gone out the window. Oh, what are we going to do? Cut by the Dolphins, but then signs with the Los Angeles Chargers. So there's a lot to unpack there because I don't know about you, but I have a pretty healthy amount of Isaiah Spiller shares that I'm a little bit nervous about. But that's a Dynasty thing. This is a redraft-centric show. Really, we should have mentioned that much earlier.
Yes.
This is
this is redraft centric, often PPR centric, though we'll dabble and have PPR. We'll occasionally make the odd comment about Superflex or tight end premium. Do not expect takes about your standard league here. No. But yeah, I didn't actually end up having a ton of exposure to Spiller just in general. I wasn't super hyped on him. I think there was a reason he fell in the NFL draft. And so while he seemed to have an opportunity in front of him in Los Angeles, I wasn't so hyped on the player. So I never got a chance to really bite and commit. Unlike Sony Michel, who I'm not incredibly excited about the player. Like, he's kind of done it before, even if it's been an incredibly mediocre way at times. So, on that Dolphins team, when they brought him in, I'm like, oh man, they must be bringing him in for a reason. And, Raheem Mostert, could really struggle to be healthy, given his age, given his history. Chase Edmonds usually is unhealthy slightly at some point every year. So, Sony Michel had a pathway to some relevance, and they cut him and then sent him to an even better situation. Because honestly, he will now have standalone value, I think, for Los Angeles. And then on top of that, he's a solid handcuff.
If anything happened to Eckler, dude, I mean, we saw him do it last year, filling in with, with the Rams, same stadium.
Yeah. He had solid numbers. He flirted with relevance and with being a starter. I don't see any reason why he can't do the same in a backup role for the Chargers.
And, and like you said, it's never been super tremendous by any means, but, there was a time not too, in the distant past, the days in New England, that, he was definitely, out here in these streets killing it a little bit. I feel
like he was a third-round pick in fantasy leagues at one point. Never a first or a second, but I feel like he was a third-round pick.
Yeah. So maybe he can return to his once upon a time in Hollywood. We try, folks.
You're gonna, at this rate, you're gonna turn him into Sony Mid-Shell.
Oh no! Oh, Oh no. Oh no.
That's great. That is fantastic.
All right. Well, moving on. And now that I get to be the floating no icon, we can close with some Jimmy Garoppolo sticking around in San Francisco. Resident Niners fan, McLateral, please tell us more about this. Please tell us.
There's a closet over that shoulder. I'm still getting used to this. That has not one, but 2 Jimmy Garoppolo jerseys, and I'm very excited. But in all due seriousness, this to me is just a matter of this team wants to win a Super Bowl. So why struggle with backups in case Trey Lance really has struggles or gets injured? I think mostly the latter. I think it's really about protecting for injury because they had the same issue with Jimmy Garoppolo. If Jimmy Garoppolo got injured, they were screwed. It took a potential Super Bowl team into being nothing. So now that he's cheaper, like they could have already afforded him in his normal contract, and now it's a much cheaper contract, and he'll be gone at the end of the year anyway. I just think it's great coverage. Like it's just great roster depth. So I'm pretty stoked about it. I think it's a brilliant move all around.
You know, and I tend to agree. And there are a lot of people that kind of view this as some sort of, and I kind of do to some degree, as like a pseudo Tua Tagovailoa, Ryan Fitzpatrick situation. Like it's a little awkward that the guy's hanging around with the young guy still around, but you know,
I can get why people from the outside would think it. I don't think it's that way in that locker room at all. I think Jimmy is known and everyone on that team is known that this is Trey's team. It was always going to be Trey's team. It was always going to be Jimmy's team last year. It was always going to be Trey's team this year. It was Jimmy's team last year. It's going to be Trey's team this year. I don't think there's like any concerns. And from what I've seen from beat writers, like the vibes are pretty good. Like everyone's on board. This is a team that went to a Super Bowl a couple of years ago that just missed the Super Bowl last year. And like, frankly, had they made it to the Super Bowl, they could have beaten that Bengals team. You know, they were this close. So I think the vibes there are pretty good. They've had a solid offseason, all things considered.
So to that end, I've seen some of the kerfuffle on the fantasy football timeline out here in the Twitter streets. People kind of getting a little, you know, panicky, sheepish on the Trey Lance thing. Again, you kind of already said it, but just to reiterate for fantasy purposes, does this bother you at all?
If you always had him outside your top 12, you're not that worried. That's how I'd put it. You know, I had him in QB 13. I'm not that worried. I'll still take him as QB 13 off the board. He is a QB 2 with significant QB 1 upside. His legs are great in terms of providing fantasy points, and he can throw the deep ball. That is like something he can do. The thing he can't do is seem to play, you know, a full season of football any given year because he's like not really played significant time over the past couple of seasons, both in the professional level and at college. So there are some concerns there, but I don't think there are any new concerns. So I think he'll struggle a little, but I think he'll overall be good. It's a good team. It's a good support system. I think having Jimmy as not necessarily a mentor per se, but like as almost an older brother figure, like he's like a solid person to turn to potentially. It's not trying to undermine his position or anything like that. Like, I don't think that hurts either. So I'm not worried. I think had I picked him like his QB 8, I would be panicking. But I think it really is more about the injury coverage than it is about Trey Lance being good or bad.
There you go. And remember, folks, as kind of wonky as Trey Lance might be in his first full year starting, 1 point for every 10 rushing yards in most leagues.
Yeah.
Also 1 point for every 25 passing yards in most leagues. What's easier to get to that 1 point total? Running for 10 or passing for 25? If you have a quarterback that can run, boom. We talk about it all the time, Konami code, the whole thing, but just, I don't know, worth reiterating because it's important. It's a big part of fantasy football.
Yeah, I think Trey Lance will struggle to finish outside the top 12 in a lot of leagues just because of his rushing value.
100%. 100%. And whatever happens in the passing attack happens in the passing attack. Unless, really quickly, because this is more of a real life football thing, but also for DST people. In our last podcast episode, we talked about our DST picks. My Philadelphia Eagles that I picked, they traded for Chauncey Gardner-Johnson from the New Orleans Saints, on top of already having Darius Slay and James Bradbury in that secondary. So not only did they become a lethal secondary unit in the entire NFL, but like a little bit more, I guess, of the fantasy relevant aspect of it. Teams that go up against the Eagles, like receivers, I'm going to be a little nervous, man. Like that's going to be a matchup that I feel like come the end of September into October, we're going to look at it and be like, oh man, I don't know if I can start like whoever this week. Why? They're going up against the Eagles, man. Like these types of things, man, like it's good to try and identify these things early. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, go ahead, share them. But I just thought it was something fun to throw out there.
No, I mean, the Eagles are a good team. They have made improvements on the defensive side. They've like added AJ Brown. Jalen Hurts looks like he's moving along. Nick Sirianni looks like he's moving along. You know, I think they win that division, to be honest. I don't believe in the Giants. I certainly don't believe in the, I guess the artist formerly known as the Washington football team. I don't know that I can call them the Commanders. And I think Dallas is going to continue to be mismanaged by Mike McCarthy, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So I think the Eagles would be my pick to win that division. I like their offense. I like their defense. And I like their special teams. As I mentioned last week, like Jake Elliott is a kicker I'm walking away every draft with and feeling pretty good about it. So, yeah, feeling good about Philly, to be honest.
And we're feeling pretty certain about that situation as a whole. I mean, you talked about it, the offense, the defense, even the special teams you're feeling pretty good about. We feel very certain about what's going on there. But what we are not sure of is some of these ambiguous player or roster situations. Boom! We're going over the 6 situations we are most unsure of. That is the big topic of the episode today. Do you want to flip a coin or something? I mean, like I never know how it's fair to. You know what? I can go ahead and start if you would like.
Yeah, that's fine. We could try and muddle through it, do a little rock paper scissors, like via the TV screen. Where do we go? Right, ready? Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Right, rock, paper, scissors, shoot. I think that's a rock.
That's it. You win.
Yeah.
You win.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, that is way more difficult than I expected. And actually, no, I expected it to be about that difficult. What I don't know what to expect is whether Jacksonville will be any good. So the Jaguars, new coach Doug Peterson, an actual adult in the room. He had top 12 offensive point ranks until 2020, where everything kind of fell apart in Philly since he became an OC in 2013 for Kansas City. He's done pretty well in terms of managing an offense. And the personnel are kind of there. Trevor Lawrence is a highly touted former first overall pick. He should be good at quarterback. We've seen him be good at quarterback in college. James Robinson has done it before. He was an RB7 in 2020. Travis Etienne has a rapport with Lawrence from college. He has high draft capital. He was the number 2 running back in his class. There are a lot of things going on there. And then that's they also build up a wide receiver core quietly over this offseason. Christian Kirk has had 200 plus target seasons, one in 2019, one last year. We finished wide receiver 26 overall. Marvin Jones Jr. was a wide receiver 11 in 2017, a wide receiver 18 in 2019. He's got multiple top 36 seasons, or his best years behind him. Yeah, they are, but there's still potential there. He's still solid. And then Zay Jones is also surprisingly solid. He was wide receiver 28 in weeks 12 to 18 last year in Las Vegas. He was a top 36 wide receiver in Buffalo, I want to say, in 2018. So these are guys who have done it to some degree before. Obviously, Marvin Jones Jr. is the only one who's truly been elite, but it's a bunch of very good receivers, or very good to stretch. It's a bunch of competent receivers.
I think they're a little better than that, though. I mean, they got some skills.
Kirk arguably is Marvin Jones would be if he wasn't quite so old. And then Zay Jones, he's a little more mercurial. But again, towards the end of last season, was competent. Wide receiver 28. That's solid. That's starting in a lot of leagues. And again, top 36 in 2018. He's not a one-time thing. He's done it before. Jamal Agnew even flashed at times last year. He's wide receiver 31 from weeks 5 to 10, which included a bye week in there, and had 12 0 PPR points per game. Like, that's not nothing. If you get 12 points per game from a wide receiver, you're going like, yeah, put him in the flex spot and feeling pretty good. And then when you look at the tight ends, you have Evan Ingram, 100 plus targets in 2017 and 2020. He had one of the better rookie seasons of any tight end. We don't particularly endorse him on this show because he's got a case of the dropsies. In the case of the not beings very goods, but there are some numbers there. There is some like profiling there that does project him as being a solid receiver. So that's something to consider, especially on a team coached by Doug Peterson, which is frequently highlighted the tight end and has even used twin tight ends effectively, which I mentioned because Dan Arnold also still on the roster, though not listed as a starter. I think that's partially due to Dan Arnold not being quite such a good blocking tight end. And Chris Manhertz, I believe, is the starter listed alongside Ingram, and he does particularly specialize in that aspect of the game. So I think that's why it is the way it is. And I'm not expecting like an elite performance from Arnold this year. I'm not honestly even expecting an elite performance from Evan Ingram this year. But they are weapons that exist for Trevor Lawrence. Like, Trevor Lawrence has a lot of weapons to work with this year and a better coach to make something happen. So it's like, is Jacksonville going to be any good? I don't think we can say the answer is no.
I mean, look, anybody who's listened to this show in the past, I mean, like, if you don't know how we feel about Travis Etienne, you better ask somebody. Because, like, just for real, like, this dude, we've talked about it a ton. Like, the opportunity that he has in front of him, everything that you described with his rapport, Trevor Lawrence in college, all that we feel pretty good about. I think, like, really what it comes down to is a lot of what you highlighted with these receivers. And if there's one that I feel really confident in over the others, and I've talked about it like on, our podcast version of this show ample times, even last year, I am somebody who's pretty well established as a big Christian Kirk guy.
He's good.
Like, it took him a while to really get the ball rolling out in Arizona, but I don't really know how much of that was his fault because, like, look, Larry Fitzgerald hung around for a little bit too long. Which, honestly, I would, even if he still wanted to play today, I would be more than glad to see him out on a football field. But, it's part of it. It's opportunity that's sapped away from other people. But, like, last year, dude, like, he really showed what he could do. They went out. I mean, don't get me wrong, Trent Baalke ruined the wide receiver market by doing this. Yeah. But the amount of money that they gave him, like, that says we intend to use this guy a lot. Yes. And in a lot of the preseason games, they targeted the hell out of him. I only got a chance to really see the majority of one of them because they played the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, of course, I watched that game. But, like, man, like, it's a night and day compared to that mess that we saw that Urban Meyer ran last year. Yeah. So, like, if nothing else, I'm not really that sure we can count on anybody outside of Etienne. We'll see where James Robinson is at eventually. Coming off the Achilles, I'm not super enthusiastic, but if he gets run, he gets run. And probably Christian Kirk, but I keep seeing the Zay Jones.
I got to tell you, Zay Jones is immediately, that little watch icon? It's going to get clicked, like, right after the draft.
Yeah.
Like, he is someone that I have written about before. I think definitely for Pro Football Mania, possibly for the Lateral as well. And it's like, there is talent there. There is potential there. Will he ever be like an elite wide receiver? No, he won't. Could he be pretty solid? Yeah, he really could. And again, like, if you can get Christian Kirk to be a top 24 wide receiver and Zay Jones to be a top 36 wide receiver, like, that's probably a solid offense. That's not a bad offense.
And, like, it's not something I would necessarily count on, but to say that those two things are impossible, I think would be wrong. I think it's within it's in the higher range of possible outcomes for that. But, like, I think what it really comes down to for me is, and I think a lot of other people too, to be honest, I mean, do we believe that Trevor Lawrence is the mega prospect? Are we because if we believe in what we were believing before the whole mess occurred, like, best prospect since Andrew Luck, that's who we're talking about here. I think he can still do it. He's somebody that he's still fairly conservatively ranked in my rankings, but I don't have him super low by any means. Like, quarterback 17.
I think I have him at QB 17 as well.
It's one spot above ECR. Right. And, like, there are some guys behind him that, like I could understand there being justification for putting them up. Like, for example, I have Justin Fields behind him. I mean, Justin Fields can run like a mofo, but at the same time, it's kind of unfortunate. That team is horrible. So
that is a team I do not have any questions about whether they're going to be good or not. They're going to be bad.
Oh God, dude, it violently bad, just aggressively bad. I just wrapped up doing another show where we were previewing the NFC North. Oh boy, did I have a lot of fun just bashing the Bears. No offense to Bears fans out there, but we're not wrong. We're not wrong.
I mean, honestly, if you had to look at these two offenses, which ones would you rather have? You got Trevor Lawrence versus Justin Fields, Robinson and Etienne versus Montgomery and Herbert, and then Kirk, Jones Jr., Jones, and Agnew versus Mooney. Who's genuinely good. Aquamania St. Brown. And then I don't even know that off the top of my head. I know who Chicago's wide receivers 3 and 4 are.
The corpse of N'Keal Harry, Velus Jones, Byron Pringle, who I think is actually the wide receiver too. Who once upon a time, he was okay as like the 3rd or 4th receiver in Kansas City, but that says everything. But that says everything you need to know anyway. I mean, but yeah, it's a point well taken, and I think there's reason to be unsure of Jacksonville. But when we kind of performed, because we did a very similar podcast to this around this time last year, and the way that we're talking about it now is so much different than the way we were talking about it at the time. And I think just even that shift in the narrative and the way that we're describing it just as a duo, like, says everything that people need to know.
Yeah, I would agree. And yeah, again, I'm not confident that they will be good, but I'm not confident they'll be bad. That's why I truly have questions about it.
I've got an offense that I'm pretty confident will be bad, if you want to hear about it, because this one, it's a doozy.
All right, give it a go.
Dude, okay, so quick side story, because it's relevant to this. I got the new Madden. And whenever I get the new game, like my whole thing is like, I want to start a franchise and just like play that franchise as far into the future as I can. But I like to play it realistically. So I pick a team that I'm just like, they're going nowhere. I have no idea what they're doing. And then I pick a team that, like, if they were to realistically fire their head coach, then it would be believable for me to make a fictional coach to come in and step in and save the day. The only thing stopping me from starting my Madden franchise with the Tennessee Titans is that Mike Vrabel is an insanely good coach and probably isn't going anywhere. But if look at this team, I caught a few glimpses of them with their reruns of their games on NFL Network. Mm-hmm. And Malik Willis, frankly, looked not super ready, but a lot better than I thought he was going to look based off of the deficiencies that we were hearing about from scouts in the draft process.
I got to tell you, I think he's going to start at some point this season.
Exactly.
I really do.
That's why it's so like, and that's just even the tip of the iceberg, because like now we have this dynamic between he and Ryan Tannehill. That's frustrating enough. And then your bell cow running back, like, dude, how healthy is he going to be? In my debut article for Fantasy Six Pack, I wrote about running backs returning from injury and kind of just did like a little forecasting. And I did some digging. I looked in the last decade at running backs at the age of 28 or older. Right. So at 28 years old, Derrick Henry is now aiming to become only the 32nd running back to put up 200 plus PPR points in a season, and only the 12th to surpass a total of 250. Now, the last time we saw this happen, it was, I believe, LaShawn McCoy in Buffalo and Mark Ingram in New Orleans, because that was Alvin Kamara's rookie season. Yep. So it's been a minute, and it doesn't happen a lot. In the last 10 years, there have been 11 running backs at that age or older to go over 250 PPR points. Mind you, this is not some arbitrary number that I put out there, because according to StatHead, last year, 250 points, just 250 points, that would have been good for RB8 overall. For Derrick Henry, at his age, with that foot injury, they kept him out for that long, and just like the amount of mileage put on that body, because like I did another exercise kind of looking at just how much abuse his body has taken. Henry has seen a nearly 11-to-1 ratio of rushing attempts to targets since turning professional. In contrast, fellow workhorse Ezekiel Elliott of the Dallas Cowboys has seen a 4.4-to-1 ratio of the same measure in that time frame. Not all exactly. Like, not all hits are created equal. When you're running it up the gut that much, that hurts a lot more than being out in the open field, because at that point you're at full speed. Gravity is going to be your friend at that point with the whole force body. I don't know. I saw it on Sports Science once, so it's a whole thing. Check the other YouTube archives after the show for the ESPN Sports Science about gravity and the force of hits in the NFL. I digress, but. So that's a concern. He shouldn't be a first-round pick. Where Derrick Henry's going, it's a nightmare. And then I shrug and say, the receivers?
Yeah, they are a problem.
Like, I mean,
they're a problem.
I want Treylon Burks to be a thing so bad, and I think he will be. So dynasty managers, just ignore everything that I'm about to say because he'll be fine. I really think he's going to develop fine. But for year one, like, we've already seen issues with the asthma or whatever it was aside. Like, that's fine. It's a health thing. Like, it happens. We just hope that he gets better, whatever it is. But he missed a lot of time early on in camp. They didn't see like a ton of him popping in the preseason. I mean, he connected with Willis on a pretty nice touchdown that I saw in the game the other day. Like, okay, but maybe not quite where we were hoping him to be, especially, because they traded A.J. Brown to make room for this. Well, also because I guess they didn't want to pay him because, thanks, Christian Kirk. We already talked about that. But either way, yeah. And then after that, it's Robert Woods coming off of an ACL tear. And then after that, it's Nick Westbrook-Akine, who was 2 games last year of relevance. I don't know.
Pretty much. I mean, he struggled with his own injury issues.
Yeah. So, like, honestly, dude, and like, I'll save the only thing I'm confident about for Tennessee because I want to end it on a high note. But just all of that put out there, how are you even feeling about this team?
I will probably have 0 Tennessee Titans on my fantasy football rosters. Honestly, I don't want to deal with the inconsistency is not the right word. I don't want to deal with the risk. Like, this is a team that is sort of precariously perched. Vrabel's a really good coach. They have a lot of solid pieces, but like, they've got some guys where it's like, if that card gets pulled out, like, the whole house kind of comes tumbling down. And yet still, despite that, like, they were a playoff team last year with like replacement level guys at wide receiver and AJ Brown, admittedly, but like, it was rough. So I don't know that I want to trust Robert Woods at that age and coming off the injury he had last year. I don't want to trust Treylon Burks this year. I, like you, share optimism for him going forward. I do not have a ton of optimism for this year. Again, I think Malik Willis might start at some point this year. I really do. He's looked more inspiring than Tannehill, to say the least. And I think that team's souring on Tannehill a little. And then, the replacement level guys, like, I just don't like Kyle Phillips is like,
could be an interesting guy, but
am I going to bet on that? Like, I'm not in a ton of leagues where I have to go that deep into the draft.
And like, at best, I mean, everybody who has been watching football for a while, I mean, remember the Adam Humphries days? I mean, like, in Tennessee, that's probably the thing he does.
Yeah. And then Derrick Henry, it's like, I don't want to bet on it. All signs say it is not sustainable. And so I'm going to bet that it's not sustainable. And there's other guys who I can take. I don't have to make that bet, and I probably end up being just fine.
So about the only thing, and because I completely agree with you. So lateral consensus, Titans, no. Austin Hooper, though, I gotta be honest, it has been a hallmark of the Tennessee offense. Because even with Arthur Smith's departure, recently, I mean, he took over the Falcons last year, but regardless, like, the offense didn't really change. No. They've had a propensity for, targeting the tight end, and it was kind of split.
Rough last year, but they also didn't have a ton of talent.
Exactly. So, like, it fits the scheme it fits what they want to do. And Austin Hooper, now his tenure in Cleveland, because people can point out, oh, well, he sucked when he was on the Browns. That's because they asked him to block a lot. He was asked to do way more in the receiving game in Atlanta. Like a tight end, more often than not, for the most part, is, at least for fantasy purposes, at the mercy of what the team asks them to do. And the Browns just didn't ask him to do it. So is he still...
the Browns also asked like David Njoku and Harrison Bryant to do it as well.
Exactly. So like it was a three-headed monster. It was a huge mess. Nobody wants that. But I mean, don't get me wrong, they have a really talented rookie tight end out of Maryland whose name I can't pronounce, but I watched him last year. He's really good. I apologize to whatever your name is. I feel so bad, but he's really talented. Look him up on the internet, add him to your dynasty roster. He could be something. But Hooper, man, like I have him pretty highly ranked in my rankings just by virtue of, especially because like it also comes down to the who the hell else type situation. And the thing for tight end success year over year, the sticky things that we look at are just, evidence of past production, opportunity for air yards, and opportunity for target share. Like Austin Hooper has all of that in a scheme that kind of lends itself really well to that position. So like I said, wanted to end on kind of a positive note about the Titans because it's not all bad. That's why this thing through the fantasypros.com, we're putting in like everybody's filling out a thing of like their top sleepers.
Mm-hmm.
Austin Hooper, he's my top sleeper at tight end for this year. I've locked it in. I can't say anything. I can't change my mind now.
For me, I can just get Noah Fant cheap enough, and I'd rather have Noah Fant. The tight end you're referring to, by the way, is Chigoziem Okonkwo, which I may be butchering that pronunciation, but that is the guy.
And it's better than me not trying. So there we go. Yes. Find that guy out on your dynasty waivers. I mean, honestly, like he was a very versatile weapon at College Park.
He's got some upside.
Yeah. If he can develop, that would be super sick. So, I mean, I think that kind of puts a bow on the Tennessee Titans. We are now through two situations that we've got. What is your second one and our third overall that you are unsure of?
This has been a popular one this offseason. It's the New England backfield, and
Hey-o.
I don't know what's going to happen in this backfield. So 2021, there was 408 rushing attempts and 106 targets. Going into 2022, we have no J.J. Taylor, though he's on the practice squad, but, how relevant will he be? I think barring injury, not so much. No Brandon Bolden, he's definitely gone. And no James White, he's retired. They added Ty Montgomery, who's dealing with an ankle injury, and historically is kind of nothing special. Like, let's be honest about Ty Montgomery. Like,
hey, 2016 was magical, okay?
There's nothing about him that screams, oh, this is it. This is the answer to his career. Like, he's just another piece.
Oh, for sure.
And Pierre Strong, who like has some flashes, is like gotten some good reports out of camp, but still a later round pick in the NFL draft and a rookie. So we have like 150 plus attempts for Harris and Ramondre as a possibility, like them each getting 150 plus attempts. I think that's incredibly reasonable. So the question then is, how does the passing game break down? Well, luckily, we know that the receptions per game were fairly even between the two last year. Like, there's not a ton to go off of. They didn't get a ton of passing work, either of them. They both had like 1.2 receptions per game. They had 5 targets in a single game for Ramondre and 3 in a single game for Harris. Like, there isn't a huge break point. Like, there's not a huge differentiation between the two. They were used in very similar roles last season. So we're kind of basing Ramondre's upside on camp reports, which have some validity, and like a little bit of preseason flash. But like, for all we know, Ty Montgomery and Pierre Strong to start, maybe Ty Montgomery once he's healthy, are going to get a lot of that passing work. Last year they used Brandon Bolden, who's not particularly special, for the most red zone targets out of the backfield. Like, he had 9 targets. Ramondre and Damian Harris had nothing special. And red zone rushing significantly favors Damian Harris, especially inside the 10. There's not a ton of vacated rushing attempts in terms of red zone. There's not a ton of vacated rushing attempts in general. For whatever that's worth, player talent kind of dictates that as much as anything else.
Definitely, yeah.
So it's like, we don't actually know how this backfield's going to shake out. We have ideas, and there's a lot of potential there because, frankly, if we split this boat down the middle, let's say it's just for the sake of argument, it's Harrison Ramondre. They split the work from last year, same as this, like it's the same this year. 408 rushing attempts, 106 targets. They split it completely evenly. If you told me you give me a running back with 204 rushing attempts and 53 targets, I'm taking that. So there is potential for both of these guys. I just don't know if there's potential for one of them to completely take over from the other.
And I think that that's something that I don't know. I mean, it's been a very popular topic this offseason for good reason and a lot of the same reasons that you described. And that's why, at least in my rankings, I do not really have them particularly far apart. But it is worth noting, just for the sake of this, because we're literally talking about it right now. I am 4 spots above ECR on Ramondre Stevenson. I have him as my running back 30. I am 7 spots below ECR on Damian Harris. I have him at RB 35. Now, before you yell at me and say, Herms, it's okay. Well, look, like it's the New England backfield. Okay. Like there are other situations that are not ambiguous that we have a lot more evidence about that I just frankly have higher. So quit yelling at me through the computer.
No, I mean, currently, without having done my cut adjustments, like I have Damian Harris at RB 31 and Ramondre at RB 35. Like, yeah. I don't think you're crazy.
Yeah. So it like, and kind of like you said, like it kind of coming down to just like talent evaluation and whatnot, you know, and I think that even that kind of ties into the Bill Belichick of it all, because, you know, he's pretty good at identifying at least running backs for the most part. His receiver acumen, I don't know, not so much, you know, N'Keal Harry, but at least as far as the running backs go, he has a knack for finding some of these guys. But the rookies don't really do a lot, you know, like their first year in the Belichick, like it takes a while to get that ball rolling. And, you know, as far as, you know, the point that you make about the camp reports kind of indicating the Ramondre Stevenson thing, like they're a very well-covered team from just a journalistic standpoint. Like, I mean, honestly, like the people who cover the team are remarkably wonderful. Like I tend to believe in the drumbeat, especially because it does go back to some mini camp stuff. But the thing that I definitely want to echo that we are very much in sync about, we think that because Ty Montgomery is a little bit banged up and who knows for how long, that Ramondre Stevenson is presumably the person that they would want to take over the pass catching. He showed he was capable of doing it in college. I know that we were both really big fans of him when he was coming into the league. I mean, I described him as a, like, you know, like the Disney hippo ballerina, you know, just like
the Lateral may have coined hashtag Ramondre Steven season.
It's entirely,
if you go through Twitter, I think there is potentially evidence that we are the originators.
I mean, wouldn't doubt it, you know, and because it took we talked a lot about him way before that preseason game that finally got, because I was so mad at the timeline that day. I was like, where were you? Because, like, yes, he was a bigger dude, but he had the ballerina toes. He could do it. Like, so just from that standpoint, like, I just think he's that good. But the whole pass catching of it all, especially because we talk about PPR in the show, like, that does have to be something that people kind of keep, you know, their brains and ears and eyes peeled for. Keep your brain peeled. No one says that. That's not a phrase. I digress. Whatever.
Keep brains.
Yeah, they got to keep those brains, you know, exactly. It's got to reach there, dig in with your nails. But yeah, like, you know, I just think at this stage, I feel more confident in the explosiveness, as especially the explosiveness size combination of Ramondre Stevenson. Like, give me that all day. But at cost, where both of them are going, because like Stevenson's only creeped up like steadily, whereas like Harris has kind of fallen a little more.
I think Harris has fallen more than Ramondre has risen.
Yeah. So like at this point, with where we're at with each of them, I feel it's appropriate to take a stab at either, because it's New England and because it's frustrating. Like, we have our preferences. For sure, I'm a Ramondre guy. Other people are Damian Harris, and that's fine, you know, because there is still.
I prefer Ramondre as a player for what it's worth, and like next year, as we talked about before the show, like I expect to rank him as a top 24 running back. There will be no Damian Harris around.
Yeah,
but I think Damian Harris still has the starting role in this offense for whatever that's worth.
That's fair. And it is entirely possible. Also, again, we talk about the possible range of outcomes of everything, realistically, of course. It is just possible that it could be another thing, kind of like last year, where Stevenson's just a thorn in the side. Like, sure, like it's weird. You kind of have to pick your poison. And for as confident as we all can be in who we think it is, I think it's fair to say that nobody really has that great of an answer. You think,
the other thing I really want to point out, the breakdown in red zone rushing attempts significantly favors Damian Harris. I don't really expect that to change. So the one thing that like kind of makes me hesitate on like hyping up Ramondre too much is we think that the passing volume will change for one of them, but we kind of know that the rushing volume won't change for Harris inside the 20, and particularly inside the 10. I mean, if you look at the splits inside the 10, I think it's like 60% to 20%. It is massive.
Yeah, I mean, and we'll see. Like, there's still a very realistic possibility, but like if we're just going based off of what we already know, it's fair to bake in the equation. Now, does Damian Harris score nearly that many touchdowns as he did last year? No. He is among the likeliest of touchdown regression candidates. I wrote about this in an article on Fantasy Pros, like in April or so. I think it was my first article with the website, and I was talking about running backs I'm avoiding. I think it was either the second or third highest. There's a tool on the website that factors in like the percentage of overall points that were scored in touchdowns. It's the regression tool. Damian Harris was so high up there.
Oh, sure.
It was just,
the guy averaged almost a touchdown a game.
Yeah. So like be aware of that for sure. But but it's important, like you said, just to make sure that we don't hype up a young running back too much, because there are other people in the backfield that exist, which kind of transitions me into my thing. That's like, dude, I love Dameon Pierce. I adore Dameon Pierce. There are Twitter receipts, me in February talking about.
Very true.
And even on this podcast in the past, talking about that I really love Dameon Pierce. I'm one of the early occupants of the hype train, okay? Like, I got one of the really nice private cars. It's wonderful. I have my own bed. It's a mini fridge and everything. Wonderful. But Marlon Mack leaving, first of all, does not just
make any difference.
No, like once upon a time, good player for sure. We liked him a ton. I think I don't know that anybody ever really had a problem with Marlon Mack, but like still working his way back from an Achilles. Like just because Cam Akers did the whole what Cam Akers did last year doesn't shatter precedent. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. It's still a very difficult thing to come back from. I think latched on back with the practice squad. Words. We'll see how that works out. But I keep seeing the Pierce rankings in some people's rankings just inch higher and higher and higher to the point where it's like, okay, now he's inside my top 36. Now he's inside my top 30. And now I'm seeing people be like, yo, top 20, baby. Let's go. He's going to be the workhorse. It's going to be the whole thing. And I'm like, whoa, slow down there, Buster Brown. Okay, time out. Like, it's the workhorse of the Houston Texans, first of all. I love the potential of this offense moving forward because I've been on record. I'm a fan of Pep Hamilton. I think he could be interesting. Hey, they've got some interesting pieces, okay? I don't know that they'll – kind of like we were saying before about the Jaguars. It's like it's a team in transition. We can't really necessarily say they'll be good, but who knows how bad they'll be.
I'm not particularly hyped on Lovie Smith as a head coach. And I'm certainly not as hyped on Davis Mills as a quarterback as I am on Trevor Lawrence. And I think those two things really matter.
That's either way. Like, yeah, but
I just want that for the record.
And that's totally fair. Definitely don't want to speak for both of us in that regard. Like the Houston Texans thing is definitely a me thing. Like,
do we both love Brandon Cooks?
That is true. Guys, draft Brandon Cooks, damn it. Just do it.
Walking 1,000 yards.
It's every time. Like, so him, Nico Collins, there's some interesting players there. Like, it could be a fun offense, perhaps. But with how bad they still are, negative game scripts are going to be a thing. Like, they're going to be playing from behind. And even in the preseason, we saw an annoying amount of Rex Burkhead on the field a lot. And he proved at situational, times last year, logical third down guy, especially for more like pass protecting assignments. I would feel a lot better if I'm Davis Mills if Rex Burkhead is out there doing that than a rookie. Just saying, like, it's just objectively true. And the offensive line, while they're still rebuilding it, and to their credit, they did open up a lot of really good running lanes for him in the preseason, but that's the preseason. I don't know. It's just like Rex Burkhead's going to be annoying enough, and the Texans are still the Texans to the point where, like, I'm unsure of this backfield from the standpoint that, like, are we getting too insane with Dameon Pierce? Because currently, like, and again, on record, love the guy to death, wonderful player. He's my RB 32, which now is 3 spots lower than ECR. But I don't think I'm unreasonable. Like, I can't go much higher. Like, am I nuts?
So I currently have him as RB 44, but again, I still have some moves to make. I don't know that I want to take Dameon Pierce over Ramondre Stevenson. I don't know that I want to take him. I think I'd maybe take him over Ken Walker, which would put him like RB 35 territory, RB 36 territory, somewhere in that ballpark. You know, I'd maybe rather take the upside a ton. Like Dameon Pierce, we are just projecting such a ceiling projection for him. This is a guy who was a day 3 pick. He's on a bad team. We think that there are flashes of talent there, some of us more so than others, but we do. But the college utilization isn't great, and that historically has mattered. Now, again, there are caveats, you know.
Well, Dan Mullen, right? Isn't that?
Yeah. We've heard the arguments, and they're not without merit. But I just I can't get too hyped on him. I just can't. I am taking him as like my RB4 in a lot of mock drafts I'm doing. And if I can get him as my RB4, then I'm just like, cool, awesome, love it. Because I'll pair him with like Chase Edmonds or Kareem Hunt, RB3, RB4. Mm-hmm. And like, to me, that works. Like I've got some upside there, but it's like, man, there's a chance where he just kind of falls flat. There's a chance this offense is not any good. And there's a chance that he doesn't get utilized quite the way we were hoping. Again, the preseason stuff's all look good, but it's just very questionable.
And I think, like, to that end, good save. And hey, we've rehearsed. We've done this before, folks. And I think to that end, like, the thing that I'm most afraid of is that, like, he has workhorse possibly being out there as often as possible. But we've seen at times in the past these workhorse running backs on bad teams. That means potentially, anyway, a lot of 16 rushes for 80 yards. And if he falls into the end zone, great. And you're talking about like more of like a robust RB build for your teams. I tend to draft the same way. Listeners, I think that, your assessment of that, I would co-sign that as well. But just for people that maybe want to go with a heavier wide receiver build or something, I think you could appropriately value him as like your RB2, but you have to be super sure that you nailed everything else, or it's really not worth doing. So I think between what you said and between that, in the aggregate, what we're really saying is a flex, right?
Yeah, he is a flex. I like, for me, like a build that I've kind of been doing is, so like in our keeper league, for example, I'm confident enough to spill a little bit of my strat here.
Oh,
a little bit of that strategy. So I'm barring freak injury, I'm keeping Justin Jefferson and Austin Eckler.
Okay.
No shock there. But then I like grabbing AJ Dillon as my RB2. Someone with some upside, but some steady volume. A rich man's Ramondre Stevenson, if you would. And then, get a little Chase Edmonds sprinkled in there. Someone with some really high upside, but some injury risks, some question marks. And then, then you slide in the Dameon Pierce. And these pieces like all kind of balance each other out. And somehow I will always end up with a viable RB2. And then I pair him with guys like Michael Pittman and Deontay Johnson. I don't worry about things so much.
It's a beautiful fantasy jambalaya that you have described. It sounds very delicious. Definitely a big fan. Yes, of course. But like, just to put a bow on it for listeners, just because I feel like we kind of just said everything that we had to say about it. Like Dameon Pierce, probably pretty good, but don't get out of this world with some expectations, because like I said, 16 for 80 some yards, maybe he falls into the end zone, maybe he doesn't. way more realistic than I think people are taking into account. It doesn't mean he's bad. And
I think
also,
he's starting to creep up on Breece Hall and redraft rankings, and to me, that's just absurd.
We've learned this. Also, just a quick note on the Breece Hall thing, just because I think we talked about it a little bit in the last episode, but just as a reminder for people, young running backs, high draft capital that already have like running backs like carried over from.
Yeah. It's okay if he gets a little slow out of the gate, but at the end of the season, you'll be glad you had him.
Yeah, because like what was that range? Because I researched it. We talked about it on an episode last year.
It was like 11 top 24 quarterbacks over the past like 6 years.
Oh no, but I mean, like it was an episode that we did a long time ago about like so on average somewhere between week 6 to week 11, sometimes for it to really happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, which wouldn't shock me.
Yeah. So just keep that in mind with Breece Hall, because I didn't mention that last week, but just like something, because we're talking about rookies. You brought his name up. I figured I'd say it.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair.
You got another fun one?
I do. There's no rookies involved in this. Well, there's a rookie head coach. So last year, Kevin O'Connell was the OC of the Los Angeles Rams. This year, he's the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings. And I do not know who's going to be the third pass catcher of value on the Vikings this year. It's KJ Osborn versus Irv Smith Jr. versus maybe Jalen Reagor now.
Hey!
Because that happened. The Vikings now have not only the wide receiver they took because they're smart, but then the wide receiver the Eagles took because they were stupid.
It's poetic.
And we weren't like necessarily the most down on Jalen Reagor in that draft class. I think you were a little more bullish on him than me, but I certainly saw athletic measurables for him. I think there was promise. I think that promise certainly has not been lived up to. No. Though if you look through the stats, it's actually not like quite as bad for as derided as he is and for as cheap as he just went. Like
he could be reclaimed.
He only had 3 games with 10 plus PPR points last year. He never established himself well. He really tailed off after week 7. And so I think for the Eagles moving on really makes sense because it became clear already last season when things weren't as good that he really wasn't going to be part of their plans. And like his only competition amongst the wide receivers was Devonta Smith. Now AJ Brown's there and they just don't need him clogging up the works. They don't. So they got rid of him. I don't blame him for it. But he's got first round pedigree. Minnesota could utilize him, and Minnesota and Los Angeles under O'Connell both have histories of producing decent pass catchers. So, this is looking at it from both like a scheme and a personnel perspective. So last year with Kevin O'Connell as the offensive coordinator, the Rams had Cooper Kupp as wide receiver 1. Don't really need to go into points per game, I think.
Pretty good.
Van Jefferson, wide receiver 36 with 9.9 points per game. Robert Woods, wide receiver 51, but 15.2 points per game. And remember, that's 15.2 points per game while Cooper Kupp is going off. It's not like it was because Cooper Kupp wasn't like quite a juggernaut. They were both doing really well.
And the overall finish because of the ACL. So
yeah, and so like wide receiver 55, Odell Beckham Jr. Again, Odell Beckham Jr. had a rough start to the season, but 9.2 points per game, like he's right there with Van Jefferson, who was wide receiver 36. And then in Minnesota, it honestly looks pretty similar. Justin Jefferson, wide receiver 4. Again, don't really need to go into his points per game.
Pretty good.
But Adam Thielen, wide receiver 28 with 15.4 points per game, awfully similar to that Robert Woods, 15.2 points per game. KJ Osborn, wide receiver 40, 9.3 points per game. Sounds a lot like Van Jefferson, wide receiver 36, 9.9 points per game. The tight ends for both teams, pretty similar. Tyler Conklin, tight end 16. Tyler Higbee, tight end 14. Now, admittedly, Tyler Higbee, 9.8 points per game. Conklin, 8.1 points per game. That's a bit more of a significant difference, but this isn't going to be square peg in a round hole or vice versa. This is actually going to be a pretty easy transition, barring the potential complication that Kevin O'Connell just might not be a good coach. Like there is always that possibility. There is still defense. There is still special teams. But from a purely offensive perspective, this should kind of be plug and play. And with the Rams, we saw a third wide receiver often having some value. Now, there were questions of stability, but that stability question almost comes down to the talent of the receiver as much as anything else, rather than the usage in the offense. So the question is, KJ Osborn, who we saw flashes of last year, is he going to be it? He was, after all, wide receiver 40. He approached 10 points per game. Or is it going to be Irv Smith, who's never seen more than 47 targets in a season, averaged like 3.6 targets per game in that season? But Conklin last year got 5.12 targets per game, and Higbee had 5.67 targets per game. So the tight end should get work in this offense. I'm not concerned about Smith's lack of work historically, given what the offense historically has provided to a tight end one without any competition, which last year both these teams had. There was no competition for Conklin. There was no competition for Higbee. Mm-hmm. But Osborn had 7 games last year with 7+ targets. So I'm leaning Osborn. He had multiple games last year with a high volume of targets. Cousins likes to throw to his wide receivers, even though the offense likes the tight ends, and Cousins has nothing against throwing to the tight ends.
Yeah.
Reagor's still struggling. Let's be honest.
Not worried about him for this.
Smith has some health issues.
Yeah.
I just don't know who's going to be the third pass. My gut says Osborn, but I just don't know.
Yeah. And, and to your point about the plug and play, I think that's very much true for fantasy purposes, at least in terms of projecting one over to the other. But it is worth pointing out, the O'Connell offense likely to be way more 3 wide receiver sets, just in terms of, that personnel grouping. The scheme will be very different, but in terms of the possible fantasy output, I think it's fair to point out probably could be something somewhat similar. And we talk about it a lot, but I still feel like people don't talk about it enough. The 2 best seasons Kirk Cousins had here, in around the DC area, Kevin O'Connell was his quarterback coach. Okay. Seriously, we talk about it. We talk about the reunion, but it's so much better than it even gets credit for. I think if they're really going to go full Rams with it, it would probably just be the third receiver that we really want to count on. But the thing about Irv Smith, and we talked about it with Joe last week, injuries have kept him out, but physically speaking, he is enough of a tweener athlete that maybe, but and plus those games with Osborn, what really helps him with that was injuries to other players that got him into that position.
This is very true. The only thing I'd say is if you go Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, Van Jefferson,
yes, yeah,
Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, KJ Osborn, it is full on same but different, but also the same. That is essentially identical.
And you are very well aware of my soft spot in my heart for Van Jefferson. So there's part of me that can't agree just because I adore Van Jefferson. But objectively speaking,
KJ Osborn.
I know. Rationally, I understand that, but there's still part of me. But yeah, it's a point well taken. And unfortunately, I don't think that there's anything that we can definitively come to a concrete sort of thing.
The problem.
So
I guess it makes so much sense to get one of these guys because I think the third target will have value.
So I guess at that point, the question really becomes just in terms of turning this into an actionable piece of advice before we transition to our last one and then get out of here. Osborn's cheaper at cost, correct?
Yeah. And Adam Thielen aging makes it more likely that he will cede value to Osborn through injury, whereas Irv Smith will get the work that Irv Smith earns.
And also Thielen's propensity for, hauling him in the end zone, that can't keep up forever. Just statistically, mathematically, in averages and whatnot.
I kind of disagree, as I disagreed last year. There is a lot of statistical evidence that shows that Kirk Cousins loves targeting Adam Thielen, specifically in the end zone and inside the 20. And I see no reason for that to change as long as Adam Thielen's healthy. The question will be, will Adam Thielen be healthy? And I think that is much more up for debate. I get why people make a touchdown regression argument for just about any player. I think weirdly, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that Adam Thielen earns touchdowns pretty stably and has a weird connection with Kirk Cousins on that front.
It's perfectly fair to point out as well, but KJ Osborn versus Irv Smith at cost, we agree.
I think I'm leaning Osborn. Yeah. Okay. If I had to draft one of these three, I'm drafting Osborn.
So, hey, folks, viewers, listeners, late in your drafts, if you don't know what to do with one of your last picks, KJ Osborn's there. I don't have his ADP pulled up because I don't need to pull it up because I know, just having done some drafts recently, KJ Osborn's there. Irv Smith, I mean, he lingers around for a while too, but probably not necessarily around for your last pick if you're playing in a league with a bunch of other people that also like waiting on tight ends, because that's a much more popular strategy these days. So, well, I believe you were on mute, sir. Oh no! There it is. Hey, he's back. Oh,
good thing we're not on video, or that'd be really embarrassing. But no, seriously, honestly, all three of these guys are affordable, so you can kind of take your shot. But KJ Osborn has the highest chance of success, and he is definitely gettable in the last round of your draft or last couple.
Well, there you go. That definitely puts a bow on the Vikings very well. And we will close with my last one that, honestly, I don't think takes a lot of discussion because we've done a pretty adequate job of covering, the certain pieces of this team the entire time that this has been a podcast. The Indianapolis Colts. Look, it's Jonathan Taylor. If you want to take him first in your draft, cool. If you prefer CMC, he's probably going to be the second pick. Whatever. That is what it is. Do your thing. We've talked about Michael Pittman and the possibility that with Matt Ryan and how much he just loves to lock onto one target. That dude easily, my big breakout pick, talked about it last week. That's going to be fine. And we also talked about, beyond that, Alec Pierce, rookie, who knows? Paris Campbell, if he could ever stay healthy, who knows? Tight ends, nothing to write home about.
I think we go on Paris Campbell, but we'll go on.
Yeah, it's fair enough. Part of me refuses to give up. But
that's okay. All of me has given up.
There you go. All of me. But the running backs. Look, here's the thing. Cut day. Kind of tying in a little bit of that news, I guess. Tyson Williams did not make that team. Phillip Lindsay did not make that team. It's
a two-man show.
It's JT and Hines, bro. And people talk about it all the time. We're just well, Nyheim Hines is good if you know when to do it. But now that it's just them, we're not, because I remember it was either not last year, maybe the year before. What was that player's name? The random running back, Jordan something, that would kind of irritatingly.
Jordan Wilkins?
Yes, who would irritatingly work his way in because Frank Reich loves to just mess with us. I don't think we're looking at one of those situations this year. So not only do I think that provides a little bit more safety to Hines, but we've seen a Matt Ryan-led offense just because. Now, when it comes to stuff like this, it's way more, at least in my opinion, just based off of some research that I've done, the quarterbacks that dump down just dump down. It's just what they're going to do. And not to say that JT can't do some of that. He'll still have some receiving work, but remember Devontae Freeman, Tevin Coleman? Remember that? Remember what we saw last year with Cordarrelle Patterson and how often he checked down to Cordarrelle Patterson? Is there enough room for Nyheim Hines to actually be a viable flex in your lineup on a week-to-week basis?
Week to week, I don't know. And I think that's why it, again, makes this list enough value that he's probably worth drafting as a RB4. Yeah. There's worse things you can do.
It's just that, I've been those people. The Nyheim Hines people. I am those people.
I got to tell you, last year, I made it through with a nearly championship run, as we previously discussed, with Tony Pollard as my RB2. Nyheim Hines could be that this year. Just that guy who gets just enough work, is just enough valuable, that despite the fact that he's not a starting running back, you could still slot him in an RB2 if you did a hero RB or zero RB build.
So are we saying this is the year we can at least somewhat trust Nyheim Hines? Because I think I'm ready to be there. I think I'm ready to do it. Given the circumstances.
Nyheim Hines, it's do I trust Frank Reich? And that I think I'm still firmly on the fence on.
All right, but just a reminder, Alec Pierce, Paris Campbell, those tight ends. I don't know.
So I really like Alec Pierce. I think Alec Pierce will ultimately have a fairly decent season.
All right, fair enough. But hey, there's a reason we go through these situations. There's a reason that we work through these exercises, because these are the things that you need to know to win your fantasy leagues, or at least make the playoffs or something. I don't know. I think we're pretty good at this. This is the Lateral Show. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. We hope that you tune in again next week. And once again, click the like on this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and hey, it's been going across the bottom of the screen this entire time. You can follow the show on Twitter at the Lateral FF. The podcast version is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find it. We put it out through Anchor. It does all the things for us. So I don't know, wherever you can find it, go for it. And if you want to leave a review for the podcast, that would be greatly appreciated. You can follow me on Twitter at Herms NFL. That is where I tweet out all of my weird thoughts about breakfast foods and also my fantasy content, including articles written here, Fantasy Six Pack, doing the thing. I'm going to have a lot of really awesome in-season articles coming out there. Also, over at Football Absurdity, I'll have a weekly column there. And then if you are interested in playing some daily fantasy, but you don't want to do the fancy daily fantasy thing that requires a lot of numbers and simulators and stuff, you just want to do prop picks, well, then Thrive Fantasy is a place that you could definitely do that. Build those lineups, do your thing. And if you sign up for the first time with your first deposit using promo code HERMS, they will match your deposit 100% up to $100. If you put in $50, they'll give you $50. If you put in $70, they'll give you $70. And if you put in $100, you will end up with $200, courtesy of Thrive Fantasy using promo code HERMS. That is what I have to say. Over to you. What do you got?
Well, it's your boy McLateral, aka McLateral FF, on the Twitter, checking to see if he is unmuted, because still getting used to this video thing. You can find me on Twitter at McLateral FF. You can also find me on Twitter at MacMcMillanATL, where you can see the latest tech reporting I'm doing, my thoughts on how Arsenal's unbeaten 5 wins in 5 matches season. Yeah, it's been football season for me for a whole month. Like, oh my God, I can't handle the fact that we might be good. And we might be good. We are the #1 team in the Premier League after 5 weeks. For those of you who don't know, have a giant Arsenal tattoo on my arm. This is like something that is very important to me, and I am losing my mind over it. But regardless, as far as the football stuff, the American football, the gridiron football, as it were, goes, you can find me at Fantasy Six Pack, where I will be bringing a column every week this NFL season, starting with the lead up to week 1. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be very exciting. Some of you who have read my work before, when the concept is revealed, it will be very familiar to you. So definitely stay tuned. We're bringing back an oldie but a goodie. And then, that's it. That's what I got. That's the show.
Hell yeah. Tune in again next week. We will have a super fun mystery surprised guest on the show to talk about something. But until then,
yeah, we'll figure it out when we get there.
There you go. But until then, that's McLateral. My name is Herms. Adios. Enjoy yourselves and do something with football. I don't know. It's
outro music.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Lateral Show. Fasten your seatbelts, because here we go.